with goals like self-determination, ending the occupation, having a state, improving conditions in Gaza. These are limited goals that especially Westerners feel that they can understand. And what I have seen over the years, certainly since the publication of the War of Return 5 years ago, is that to the credit of Palestinians, they have been consistent and clear for a century. And this is the Palestinians. It's everyone. They have been clear about the fact that their battle is with Zionism. Their battle is not about the settlements. It's not about ending Israel's military occupation of the West Bank or the one that ended in Gaza in 2005. They're actually not looking to improve the conditions in Gaza. What they want is for the Jewish people not to have their state in any borders whatsoever. So to the credit of Palestinians, for over a century, they've been clear and consistent, not just in their declarations, but in their actions, and of course, in their key strategic choices, rejecting any option for a Palestinian state next to Israel because they want to have one instead of Israel. Now, Gaza in particular cannot be understood if one does not appreciate that the vast majority of Gaza's residents are people who continue to view themselves, despite being born in Gaza, having lived in Gaza their entire lives, never been displaced by war, they view themselves as refugees from Palestine. Now they're in Gaza. Whatever your political view is, we can agree that Gaza is in Palestine, certainly from the Palestinian perspective. And yet Palestinians born in Gaza do not consider themselves people who live at home. They consider themselves refugees from Palestine, which means that Gaza to them is not a place that they want to develop. They're not looking to improve the conditions. They're not looking to make it into a prosperous example of how Palestinians can run a sovereign state. They want to use it as they have repeatedly, and yesterday to devastating effect, as a launching pad to take, in their mind, back what belongs to them, which is the entire territory of the state of Israel. This is what the battle is against. So, and ultimately, this is a century-long battle of exhaustion. And we can win one battle, we can win one war, but it's going to take a while for the Palestinians, like the Egyptians, like the Jordanians, to finally end their century-long battle against Zionism. But this is what it's all about.
Well, I can't say it's overly optimistic because it's not, but it means that this battle is still long ahead. Gil, I do want to talk to you. You know, you've written your story and written many books, but also have a special focus on U.S.-Israel relations. So I want to pick your brain on that for a moment, and I want to talk about President Biden. He gave a impressive, I would say, statement last night. Here, you know, for our evening in Israel. First of all, it's Saturday in Washington. The president doesn't always get up and give a statement. It was just the beginning of a conflict. Maybe he would wait a little longer, but he had the sense of urgency to speak, for it to be live, for the world to hear, and he had some messages in there as well. He also spoke with Netanyahu, and he said, "I will be in touch personally with the Prime Minister of Israel over the next few days."
Yaakov, just to note that as we speak, the Prime Minister's office released a statement saying that Biden and Netanyahu just had a second conversation.
So exactly. So thank you. So proving exactly that point. This is after they didn't meet, right, for 9 months or so. They just had that meeting on the sidelines at the UN General Assembly just a few weeks ago. How do you make what's happening now? Biden, his administration, specifically the Democrats, the way he's standing very strong with Israel, what's kind of the inside story here?
So for starters, we do have to say, God bless America. We have to acknowledge that this isn't just about Joe Biden and Bibi Netanyahu, whatever tensions they may have had, and whatever Biden said yesterday, that this is an ongoing, decades-long love affair It's a strategic partnership. It's a values partnership. It's two democracies that have each other's back. And it's not surprising and quite rational that with all the tensions over the last couple of months, nevertheless, given those ugly images that course through our television screens and the blood that coursed through our streets right here in Israel, that the President of the United States would stand up and say, we've got your back, we're behind you. But let's be honest, that's not enough. In the same way that in a few months from now, as you said, we're going to have to go through a little bit of an accounting of what went wrong on this side of the pond, there's also going to be a question about what went wrong on that side of the pond. To what extent was the Biden administration's, like, their softness toward Iran? They certainly say critical things about Iran, but they don't have the same passion in denouncing Iran that many Biden administration officials have in denouncing Saudi Arabia. You feel a tonal gap. How did that play in? How did the $6 billion that the Biden administration allowed to go into Iranian pockets play in? How did Iranian strategy and Iranian tactics and Iranian weaponry help boost Hamas, both tactically and also existentially? So I'm definitely very grateful for the United States of America and for its support. I think we have to see it grow and grow, but I think we also have to push back a little bit. Those of us who are not representatives of government, who should just be saying thank you and how can we work together. Those of us a little bit on, as bridges, should be thinking about these questions not only for the sake of Israel, but also for the sake of the United States of America and its global standing throughout the world. I want to say two other things, if I may. One thing is that it's also really important that the American Jewish community understand that this is the initial shock. And unfortunately, there's a phenomenon, and we saw this also during the Gulf War, that I remember vivid pictures of a Star of David in a toilet, and that was very exciting on CBS News. When Jews are knocked down, when Jews are the victims, the world says, we're with you. But once we start defending ourselves, then we're going to have a very, very short stopwatch, and we're not going to have much of a timetable. And it's very important that American Jewry, our close friends, our brothers and sisters, stand up, learn the facts, read the books that so many of my esteemed colleagues here in JPPI and on this call have written, and understand that it's important that we need time to solve this problem. And we need time to, as you wrote so beautifully in your column this morning, Yaakov, change the equation. And if I may, one more thing, because I think one of the things that's interesting is we're all sitting in Israel. We all have skin in the game. Some of us, like I, have kids who are deployed and mobilized. I want you to know that I felt a change today. I woke up this morning in Jerusalem and there was a heaviness in the air. There was a hangover. There was a paralysis. And just in the last 2 hours, I've gotten more and more WhatsApps. We need 50 backpacks for the South. My son's brigade needs 80 bars of soap and shampoos. And my wife literally just before this broadcast sent me a picture. She went with a shopping cart to fill it because I was preparing for this Zoom. And she got 200 shekels from the Frischman family who saw these crazy shopping carts, knew what she was doing and said, we want to help. And yes, we've suffered a terrible blow. And the names of the dead are starting to come out, and the stories and the heartbreak. And as you mentioned, Shmuel, it's also the trauma of those who even survived, what they're going to have to live with the rest of their lives. But we're starting to see, don't poke the bear. And the Israeli military is going to do what it needs to do. But also the Israeli people are resilient, and we are not going to give in, and we are not going to be depressed, and they are not going to knock us down. And we're going to do whatever we can. And that also our American Jewish friends can come, not write checks, send love. And if also a little bit of Venmo comes along to help us buy, Venmo helps us come to buy more supplies, that's good too.
Thank you, Gil. Moving remarks. Just one thing about the Biden speech yesterday, which I found very interesting, was that I think maybe the most important line was when he said, no one else should think they can take advantage of the situation. That was clearly directed at Hezbollah in the north. And we've seen a very tense day up there with some mortar fire, Israeli retaliatory fire, soldiers, now forces being bolstered along that border. Israel's, I want to say worst nightmare, because there are worse things that could happen, but a very big nightmare right now would be that Hezbollah does engage, and their rocket fire would really be potentially devastating for Israel. We could talk about that another time. So Shmuel, I do want to get back to you though. Bibi, right? Let's talk about him just for a moment. He's not someone who likes to use force. He's been prime minister for a long time, and we've seen he doesn't like to put boots on the ground. He doesn't like to send soldiers into Gaza. He likes the robotic, surgical standoff, from a plane 30,000 feet up in the air or a drone. How much do you see when you look at his coalition? How much do you see, is he being forced into an aggressive response, or is it just so terrible what happened that he knows he doesn't have another alternative? He actually is leading the pack right now.
No, in this case, I think he was forced by reality. What Israel is reacting to. What happened yesterday is we should call it by its name. It was a massacre. In many of the cases, people were just slaughtered by armed militants when they were partying in the woods, or when they were walking in the streets, or running, or going to the synagogue. This was not a military fighting a military. Of course, there were also soldiers and police officers who died as they fought against the militants. And in many of the cases, this was a massacre of innocent Israelis, like in a shooting range. And I don't think any Israeli government could look at such event and say, we are going to respond with, measurably or with restraint. In such case, you must respond with force. You must clarify. When you think about the way countries project power, in this case, Israel needs to project power for two reasons. It needs to project power because it must clarify both to Hamas and Hezbollah and all other enemies that we have in the region that we did not lose our edge, that we can still be fierce and we can still fight wars. So that's the thing we must do for external reasons. But an Israeli government also must send an internal message to the Israeli people that that Israel is still strong enough for Israel to withstand this attack and the next attack and the one after the next attack. We Israelis must be convinced that we have the power to defend ourselves. Right. And in this case, we did not have such power. We were taken by surprise. We were slaughtered in the streets and in the woods. And the Israeli government is sending a message both externally and internally to the people of Israel that we're still in charge, we still have the power, we will recharge and we will respond. And if you want historic comparisons, you must compare it to the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was taken by surprise, and the first couple days were devastating, but then Israel was able to overcome and turn around the war. This is what the Israeli government and the IDF must do today. They must turn around the situation and make sure that we all understand, Israelis and non-Israelis, that Israel still have the robustness to defend itself and against all enemies.
I just want to remind the people who are attending, you can put questions in the Q&A. We'll be happy to grab a couple of those. We're trying to stick to a tight schedule to be done at 40 minutes after, so 22. But just one comment on what you said, Shmuel. I think the difference is, obviously it's 50 years just to Yom Kippur, but I think one of the differences is that Yom Kippur was soldiers against soldiers on the Egyptian front, soldiers against soldiers on the Syrian front. What we saw yesterday are people being slaughtered in their homes at that rave, people on the streets of Sderot and Ofakim and other cities. It questions the whole raison d'etre of Israel, right? If we can't keep ourselves safe in our own homes, then what is, and these comparisons that people make to the Holocaust, of course, I reject those. I mean, we have, just like you said, we have the abilities to defend ourselves, but I understand where that does come from. Einat, you're a former Knesset member. You've been in coalitions before with the current prime minister, Netanyahu. I'm curious, when you look at the offer that's still out there on the table, which hasn't been actualized yet, of a unity government between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Benny Gantz or Yair Lapid, the two of them, one of them, how serious is this? Do you think it might happen? And if it does, would you anticipate any change in policy that we would see otherwise?
Let's begin by saying that the current government is, it's a bunch of clowns and cowards. And one can admire Netanyahu for many years, but he has clearly collapsed now. He's the only people who have courageously addressed the people of Israel have been President Biden, who still remains the only one who gave an inspiring, powerful, and clearly supportive speech, and supports from all around the world, including, for example, from President Zelensky. Our leaders, from Netanyahu all the way to the government, are literally missing in action. They have cowardly escaped talking to the people. They have completely collapsed. And I don't think they understand what they're dealing with. I think they're still clinging to some world that doesn't exist anymore. And the sooner there's an understanding that this government has collapsed, and I will say even more, half of this government are people who have no moral mandate to lead people to war. It is people who, as a matter of ideology, the ultra-Orthodox, want their voters not to serve in the military, not to partake in Israel's defense, only take from the country. And now we're beginning to see that you cannot have people who are only taking and not giving. You have a bunch of messianic lunatics that, as a result of their provocations in the West Bank, all of the military was there. And again, either Israel has a military that defends its borders, or it has a military that babysits pagan rituals in the West Bank. We can't have both. We have basically sacrificed Israeli citizens living on sovereign Israeli territory for the messianic delusions of people who are beyond Israel's borders.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. I totally accept the criticism, all good. But just to the question of the chances of a unity government, we also have one of those questions in the Q&A. An anonymous attendee is asking, what are the odds of a unity government being formed? Okay, your criticism in place, accepted. Can Netanyahu kick those guys out and bring in a former chief of staff, Benny Gantz, a former defense minister, and Yair Lapid, a former prime minister?
Let me put it this way. If he thinks that he can continue as is with the partners that he has, and that he has a moral mandate, then he is another rude awakening is coming. And I would say Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid have to in many ways take the reins of power from him if he continues to think that those partners are people with whom he can manage the state of Israel and conduct war. We are beyond political niceties and democratic coalitions. Either this is managed by people with a moral mandate and actual experience. With all due respect, other countries can afford to be governed by clowns and mediocrities and lunatics, and they can survive it. The state of Israel cannot survive that kind of leadership.
Okay. Thank you, Einat. Gil, I want to ask you, Einat kind of did touch upon the internal Hasbara, right? We're not hearing anybody, which I find to be deeply disturbing myself, which leads also to the state of shock. The only person who I see speaking occasionally just now put out another statement is the IDF spokesperson. But where is the so-called Hasbara minister? Where is the forum? Why are people not talking before they even go on CNN? Talk to Israelis, reassure the Israeli people. But, if you could maybe also say something about that, but also what you've seen so far playing out in the international media. You wrote a great piece in the Wall Street Journal. You called it Israel's 9/11. In the piece that I wrote, I called it Israel's Pearl Harbor, but we had a similar point. What are you making so far, 36 hours in, of the Israeli PR?
My understanding, first of all, is that President Herzog has said that he's going to address the nation this evening. And I think
in exactly an hour.
In exactly an hour. And I think that's very powerful because I think throughout this whole difficult 9-month period, he has been the one who has spoken to both sides with respect. He is the one who's really set a certain moral tone. And I think, Einat, that yesterday we got a certain moral clarity. And we also were invited and frankly bullied into putting some of our political differences aside. I think we agree much more on our analysis of the government than we disagree. But fundamentally, I think at this point, we have to play the hand that was dealt us. And we have a certain government in place. And I'm hoping that Gantz and Lapid will come in. But for me, the most important thing is to make sure that we put our politics aside. We put our division aside. I think for 9 months, we've been broadcasting weakness, division. And I think that was one of the factors. And I think when the inevitable commissions come in, we'll talk about that. I'm not blaming the left, and I'm not blaming the right. But I think right now we had a day of moral clarity, and we're going to have a week of moral clarity. And I think we really need to keep that clear, and we need to keep our goal clear. Our goal right now is to protect, first of all, the South and protect every Israeli. Our goal right now is to mobilize the soldiers the best we can. Our goal right now is to hope that Defense Minister Gallant, who was always seen as the grown-up in the government, is working with the chief of staff of Tzahal and the leadership there, who also have, again, accounting to do eventually. And we've just got to focus on winning this war and in some ways, this is not nice, but out crazying the crazies. Because if we don't return some balance of deterrence and some balance of power and some balance of them fearing us more than we fearing them, we're in trouble. So look, as I said earlier, the international community, the Western world, liberal Democrats are so far saying this is unacceptable. President Zelensky from Ukraine, the European leaders, the EU, Americans are saying this is not going to stand. And it's terrifying, right? The notion that that terrorism can, after 9/11, come back, rear its ugly head, and do so much damage is very disturbing. But my question continues to be, how long? How long a leash will we get? And how long a timetable will we have to start doing what we need to do?
So I want to thank the three of you, and thank Laura, Cam, also Sahara for introducing all of us. I want to again reiterate, we're going to be doing this every day for the coming week and possibly longer, depending on how long this conflict goes into the next couple of weeks. So we're going to be rotating and have different experts come from the Jewish People Policy Institute, from JPPI, who will be with us here 6 p.m. Israel time, Sunday to Thursday, talking about what's going on in the conflict, what are the repercussions, what can Jews of the diaspora potentially do? Gil, you kind of touched upon that, but I think that's going to be a big issue for us as the days go by, is what more can people do besides for opening up, transferring through Venmo? Is there more that they can do? And Shmuel has done research, obviously, into polling and research and stats of sentiments and feelings of definitely the North American Jewish community about the government until now, and how will all that change? We have lots to talk about. Thank you so much for joining with us. Thank you again to our partners from Jewish Agency for Israel and JFNA. And that will be it for today. Let's all hope for a quiet and peaceful, as much as is possible, evening ahead of us. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you.